In this lesson, we're going to talk about liberalism and the way in which liberalism views and understands the concept of human nature. Now, the way in which liberalism views and understands human nature heavily informs essentially a lot of the various ideas within liberalism. So, hence why this is such an important topic to discuss. We're going to be talking about a number of the core ideas surrounding the ideology of liberalism in this lesson and over the next few lessons as well. And we're going to begin with this idea of the human nature within liberalism. The next lesson will look at how liberals therefore take this understanding of human nature and applies it to an understanding of society more broadly. So the general view of liberalism is closely reflected and associated with the views of the Enlightenment. We made this very clear in the previous lesson that while liberalism has a lot of religious origins in terms of the growing individualization of religion under New Protestant ideas within the Reformation, liberalism itself was born out of the secularization of this individualistic idea, and so therefore was born out of the views of the Enlightenment. The principles of human nature in liberalism was first articulated by John Locke, and then also articulated by a later philosopher, some argue the first modern liberal, this being John Stuart Mill. One can understand a liberal human nature by looking at the distinctions between human nature in the medieval period and that of the Enlightenment period. The medieval notion of human nature is, as you would expect and as you would imagine, tied very closely to religious doctrines of original sin. Original sin being an Augustinian idea in terms of this idea that humans are born with original sin owing to the fall of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden, and that things such as baptism is important for the establishment and the forgiveness of original sin. The traditional Christian understanding is that mankind is deeply flawed and imperfect, and to overcome this, you must pray for grace with God. The idea of grace is also an idea that was developed by St. Augustine as well. So it's important to remember that these ideas are not necessarily derived out of the primary source being the Bible, even though, of course, Augustine uses the Bible as authority for it, but a various number of doctrines that were seen to be quite important and seminal to the Catholic faith came out of the various church fathers who developed theological doctrines after the Bible. In fact, in some cases, a few hundred years after the Bible. Locke, however, will deny this view of human nature, the idea that humans are imperfect and deeply flawed, and that they are born with original sin, and to overcome this, you have to pray for grace with God. All of these ideas are things that Locke vehemently would reject. The liberal view of human nature, therefore, is that human beings have the capacity to bring about progress, and this would therefore, in conjunction with this, entail further happiness in the future. It is an early case that contrasts with the medieval view. A common conjunction with this idea of human nature is the idea of rationality of humans. The liberal view asserts that humans are inherently rational creatures, and that it is this rationalism that allows humans to find solutions to a number of questions. The idea of rationality is something that is closely linked as well with the Enlightenment, the idea of us moving away from the sole source of authority for truth and value coming from religious doctrine to something of philosophical doctrine, to something of scientific doctrine, being more important to the establishment of truth and the establishment of reality than that of the religious. Remember, when we go from the medieval period, you note that the ideas of nature, the ideas of science and development, all derive out of principles of religion. Whereas in the Enlightenment, rationality and philosophical ideas that essentially remove religion from the idea of seeking truth becomes more prominent. So as a result of this, you get new ideas relating to a subject within philosophy known as epistemology. Epistemology is the study of knowledge and where knowledge comes from, how you can be justified in your beliefs, all of these different things. Of course, medieval epistemology was inherently theological. It was inherently linked and related to the idea of religion. Whereas as epistemology develops into the Enlightenment period, you note that the theories of knowledge become more important in terms of their relation away from religion and towards that of rationality. Liberalism would believe that mankind's innate reason is manifested in debate and discussion and the logical examination of ideas, not just an arduous relationship with the religious. It is the idea of rationalism that gives the liberal view the ability to allow human nature to shape our own destiny, rather than having it being prescribed to us by some kind of objective fundamentalist religious thought. For liberals, individuals are naturally self-seeking and self-serving. This becomes known and is closely linked to this idea that we see here called egotistical individualism. Egotistical individualism is essentially the view that human beings are naturally drawn to the advancement of their own interests. They will act in their own best interest in making decisions rather than in the interest of others. Now, liberals claim that individuals are both egotistical, so they exhibit signs of egotistical individualism, but that they are also reasonable. It means that they can look to advance their own interests, but can also be sensitive to the perspectives of their peers. Essentially, the idea here being is that for most people, liberals believe that they are egotistically individual in terms of their ability to advance their own self-interest, but not so egotistically individual that they will essentially do anything in their power to advance their own interests, even including things like killing other individuals to do so. In reality, they are sensitive to the perspectives of others.